ask you, can you please give us an insight into your background? Introduce yourself.
I was born in Strasbourg in France to Turkish parents, and shortly afterwards my parents got separated. I came back to Turkey with my mom, and from then on I was raised by a single mother. And I lived in various countries. In Spain, there was a time in Jordan, in Germany, and afterwards I went to America. I lived in Boston, Michigan, Arizona. So life has been quite nomadic. I write fiction in both English and Turkish, and basically I see myself as a storyteller, I guess. Yeah.
And what led you to start writing, and what inspired you to write, and what does writing mean to you?
3, 2.
I didn't repeat the question.
What does writing?
Yes, what does it mean to you, and what led you to start writing?
I started writing at an early age, at the age 8, but that's not because I had any dreams of becoming a writer or anything like that. I was an only child. I was a lonely child, and I thought my life was terribly boring, and books were the most colorful things in my life. That's how everything started. I've always found the world of fiction, the world of stories, much more colorful and perhaps real than the so-called real life. And from then on, it never stopped. It was like the only suitcase I took with me wherever I went. It gave me a sense of continuity, a sense of coherence, and a sense of center writing stories.
Interesting. And what authors and books have influenced you? What are you reading now?
There's so many authors, who have influenced me in one way or another. Sometimes for completely different reasons. In one author you like his style, in another you like his heart, the rhythm. So it varies. And my reading list has always been quite eclectic. I like to perhaps combine readings from the East and the West. So I do read extensively on Western literature, particularly European literature, European novel, Russian novels, Russian literature, in addition to Turkish literature, of course. But that said, I also love to read on Sufism. I love to read Rumi, and they might seem very different at first glance, but I think there are lots of connections.
And in your books, you write both in English and in Turkish. Are you the same Elif Şafak? Does it differ? Because instead of translating, you write separately, and does it change? So what changes?
That's a tough question. However, I like to commute between languages. I'm very attached to the Turkish language. It's the language of my grandmother. It's the language of my childhood, and I have a very emotional and strong, profound connection. Yet at the same time, I also love and enjoy writing in English. To me, it's a mathematical language. It's more cerebral, It's very stimulating, both intellectually and spiritually. But I guess what I like most is to be able to commute back and forth between languages. And I think we are always a different person when we speak another language. Even our voices change. Even our intonation, the tone of our voice changes. And those changes are quite exciting. There's nothing wrong with that, particularly in this age. I believe it's quite possible, why not, to be bilingual, multilingual. I mean, we can dream in more than one language. If we can dream in more than one language, we can write fiction in more than one language as well.
And you obviously write mostly about Sufism.
Yeah.
In your book, Aşk.
Yeah.
What is it about Rumi and Sufism that is so important and so special to you?
Well, my interest in Sufism started in my early 20s. I was a college student, and to be honest, to this day, it's a big dilemma for me. Why I felt drawn to this topic, because I did not grow up in an environment in which people knew anything about Sufism, and I at the same time was, quite a leftist, feminist, nihilist, person who had nothing to do with this philosophy. So why was I drawn to it? I don't know. I really don't know. The only thing I know is I started reading about it, and it was always books that opened the gate of Sufism for me. So one book led to another. When you find a piece of information that you think is interesting, the footnote, of a book, that leads you to another book, and so on. To this day, I still enjoy reading about this subject and thinking about this subject. So it's a continuous journey. It's nothing like, there's no way you can know this. You just keep going. You just keep learning. You're always a student, I believe. I mean, I'm always a student. That's how I feel.
And I mean, your book, Success in Turkey and Abroad, and it's a story of love in the light of Sufism. And do you think the reason for its success is because people are hungry for this sort of love rather than the typical love that's in other novels that's explained? And do you think this is the reason for its success? And too many questions, but is this? I
believe there are several reasons why. The book did relatively so well, and maybe all these reasons should be taken into consideration. So rather than stating one reason, I would rather see it in a more multi-layered way. Now, for instance, since my first novel, Pinhan, which has not been translated into English, interestingly, and my readers have widened like circles. With every book, new readers have joined, and it has been a very rewarding experience in that sense. It has been a very inspiring experience for me. And when we came to Aşk, it became even wider. That said, of course, certainly the very subject of the book has also been influential. The fact that it speaks about Rumi, it speaks about Shams of Tabriz and the spiritual love and the philosophy of it, but also how that philosophy perhaps can be carried into the modern world. Because maybe one of the basic facets of this book is I did not approach Sufism as a bygone thing, as not something that belongs to history, but as something that is still living in this present day, in this present moment, and perhaps that too had an effect.
And your story blends Western and Eastern Irish American housewife. What was so special and unique about her? Why her? And why did you combine her with the tale of Rumi and Shams?
I guess in all of my novels, I like to bring characters from completely different backgrounds together, and that cosmopolitan energy is something that I cherish. I believe in this world, if we are ever going to learn anything, we're going to learn it from people who are different than us, not our exact replicas. So I like to play with differences. But that said, in this book particularly, I think in some ways I wanted to keep Ella as I don't want to call ordinary, but there's nothing extraordinary about her, and that was a big decision for me, because as writers we always want to have extraordinary characters, but this time I wanted the simplicity, of ordinary life, and how the voice of Rumi can perhaps shape that life, can change that life. So it was very important for me to, make her a typical housewife in some ways, and then show the effects of this philosophy on that life.
And your novel, Bastard of Istanbul, gives its readers an insight into Turkish and Armenian culture, and also some of their respective problems. And what personal experiences led you to portray these two people in the way that you have in the book?
My books are never, they're not autobiographical, works. I'm not my own starting point. Just the opposite. I like to be someone else. I like to put myself in the shoes of another person, and then to look at the reality from the eyes of that person, and then from the eyes of another person, and keep moving, keep changing. This, I believe, is quite important. The notion of empathy is very important in the art of literature. So in The Bastard of Istanbul, as well as in the other books, I've always tried to create different characters and show how multi-layered, the truth is, to look at the reality from their perspectives, and then let the reader make the rest of the journey. So there's nothing very autobiographical in it. I believe in the power of imagination, to be able to just to imagine. That's what excites me more.
And also, Turkey is currently witnessing a political transformation. What are your views on this, and also what part does literature play in this?
Interestingly, in Turkey, literature has an important role, and in some ways I find it amazingly interesting. the emotional connection you have with readers in Turkey is something I haven't witnessed in other places. And if in Turkey literature, novels are such an important force, I think we owe it to women, because women read more. And these are women from completely different backgrounds, young women, old women, some are housewives, some are professional women, some cover their heads, some do not cover their heads. And all this variety, it is the women that, keep it going. And in that sense, I find it really interesting. However, the written world, the written culture in general is more male-dominated. So it's like women read, men write. And I believe that's one of the things that needs to change, and it is changing.
You mentioned women from many different backgrounds. I mean, your female characters in the book, Bast of Istanbul, come from many different backgrounds. Muslims, someone in exile, and they appear in many different lights in the novel. And what statement do you think the novel makes about women's roles, both in the past and in the present? What are your thoughts on that?
Usually literary critics say my female characters are quite vivid and they're strong characters. That doesn't mean that they're perfect, none of us is perfect. And I don't believe in heroes. I don't believe in creating heroes. I think we all have our, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, flaws. But that said, I do not think that even in patriarchal societies, women are, just oppressed beings. The women are always struggling. Women are always developing themselves, even in very traditional or very, seemingly patriarchal settings. So I like to bring that element to the fore and to show the variety. One of the things that amazes me in Turkey is even under the same roof, in the same family, among different sisters, you see different lifestyles. One of them can be covered, the other one perhaps not. Perhaps one is married to a leftist man, the other one is married to a conservative man. And all these people are constantly, intermingling. That's something that sometimes political analysts fail to realize, but I think it's very important in order to understand the complexity and the richness of a society. And
you said autobiography, but you expressed your problems and your struggles in your book, Black Milk. Are you now very different?
No, I think I am always a different person after a new book. I mean, writing changes me so much. When I start a book, I'm a different person. At the end of that book, I'm a different person, because I'm constantly changing. And that's why when I look at the books I have written, each and every one of them is so different. The energy is different, the story is different, because they were written at different stages of my life. But the change is continuous.
And themes such as end in your books, and how would this relate to your own experiences and your general worldview?
I've always, since my early childhood, retained a nomadic existence, if I may say this. Life has always been out of a suitcase. You're always, traveling. In some ways, it's a very rewarding experience. In some ways, it makes you feel very lonely. But nevertheless, I believe I am learning many things from, all these multicultural connections. There's a metaphor, again, used by Rumi, which I cherish a lot, which I like a lot. He talks about a drawing compass, and one leg of the drawing compass is quite static. It's fixed in one place. Just like that, I believe one part of my fiction writing is deeply rooted in Istanbul. It's fixed there. But the other leg of the drawing compass draws a huge wide circle around the center. And just like that, the other leg of my fiction is traveling the world and feeling connected to different cities. So I believe it's quite possible to be from one place and to be a world citizen at the same time.
And now that you have a family now and a baby, and wanting to withdraw on one hand responsibility at home, how do you balance this?
It's always a challenge, I believe, for a woman writer. How to balance this, perhaps, the writer in her, with the mother in her, with the wife in her. And I'm not going to claim that I can always juggle all these balls in the air very successfully. Sometimes I feel like, wow, I'm doing this well. Sometimes they're just falling on my head, all of them. But I keep trying, and I believe all women in some ways or another, keep doing this, because women always have multiple roles, multiple responsibilities. You don't have to be a woman writer, you can be doing something completely different, but these are very common questions for all of us, and we're all trying very hard, I believe.
And what does faith mean to you?
That's a tough question. I mean, it's something I can feel inside, but it's more difficult to perhaps put it in words. But all I know is, for me, faith is not something that excludes anyone. It includes everyone.
And if it's possible, can you perhaps read a line from your book, or something that means very important to you, specific?
I don't have a copy with me. No, sorry. Maybe we'll have to skip that.
Maybe for another time.
Maybe another time, inshallah. Okay.
But we'll end it here.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elif Şafak.
I appreciate it.
And I look forward to listening to your
I appreciate it. Thank you.